Robbie Ray is headed to the San Francisco Giants, and Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani are on their way to the Seattle Mariners. Welcome into another edition of the Kerry Crowley Show, talking all things Giants baseball. And today, instant analysis to the trade that Farhan Zaidi and Jerry DiPoto have pulled off. And yes, another Giants Mariners deal. This time, the biggest trade that these two teams have made in the last several years. So let's break it all down. Robbie Ray, former American League Cy Young Award winner, headed to San Francisco coming off a disappointing season. He made just one appearance for the Mariners and then underwent Tommy John surgery. Mitch Haniger heads to the Seattle Mariners, back to the team where he had prior success before he signed the 3-year, $43+ million deal with the San Francisco Giants. And Anthony DeSclafani also headed to Seattle coming off of the ankle or foot surgery that he had last year that kept him out for most of the season. So I think Giants fans can look at this a few different ways. One, I think Giants fans have been looking for the organization to show them a direction this offseason, to show them that they're all in on pitching, that they're going to sign hitting, that they're either going to go all in on their prospects or they're going to acquire proven veteran talent in an effort to make the postseason and become a contender in 2024. And I think this trade, while it includes several notable names in Robbie Ray, Mitch Haniger, and Anthony DeSclafani, does not provide any sense of the direction that the Giants are moving. Andrew Baggerly of The Athletic reporting that it's essentially a cash neutral trade. The Giants are sending the Mariners $3 million to offset the costs of acquiring Haniger and DeSclafani for next season. Of course, Robbie Ray owed $23 million already in 2024. So it's a cash neutral trade for the upcoming season. And that doesn't really tell us a whole lot. It also doesn't tell us whether the Giants are prioritizing starting pitching this offseason because, again, Robbie Ray had Tommy John surgery. He won't be ready to pitch until at least the second half of the 2024 season. But what it does tell us is that the Giants are ready to move off of Haniger and ready to move off of DeSclafani, two of, believe it or not, the richest free agent contracts that Farhan Zaidi has handed out during his tenure in San Francisco. And by moving those players, I think it is, in many ways, an admission that those deals were not ones that the Giants really effectively did. I think that you can look at them not as an admission of failure, but those two players just didn't fit the Giants roster in 2024. I think that the Giants could still acquire outfield help, or they could play some of their kids in the outfield, Luis Matos, Wade Meckler, but Mitch Haniger wasn't going to provide surplus value for the Giants in 2024, so they were ready to move off of him. Anthony DeSclafani was a gigantic question mark coming off of basically two seasons when he didn't take down many innings for the Giants. And so to have to give him starts during spring training, to have to give him starts at the outset of the regular season, just wasn't going to be something that the Giants were willing to invest in because they've got a number of up-and-coming young starters in Tristan Beck, Keaton Wynn, Kyle Harrison, Mason Black, maybe even Carson Whisenhunt that they would like to prioritize when this team reports to Scottsdale at the outset of spring training. And so this trade does not provide a direction that the Giants are headed in. It does not tell us much about the 2024 season, and it really doesn't tell us much about the future. Yes, they're committed to Robbie Ray. They're on the hook for the $25 million he's owed in 2025 and 2026. 2 years, $50 million left on his deal after the 2024 season. But Robbie Ray can also opt out after this 2024 season, and it feels unlikely right now. It doesn't seem as if Robbie Ray, who's coming off Tommy John surgery, would return, make 12 starts at the end of the season, potentially help the Giants in the playoffs if they're fortunate enough to get there, and then opt out of his contract. But it wouldn't be a Farhan Zaidi deal if it didn't include a player with an opt-out. And so I think that if we're looking for one move that sums up the Farhan Zaidi era in San Francisco, which again began in November of 2018 and has extended through this offseason, he got the 3-year extension from Greg Johnson and the Giants ownership group to maintain his status into 2024, 2025, and 2026. This, to me, is the move that kind of sums up the tenure and the transactions that he's made in San Francisco. He's taking on Robbie Ray, a pitcher with an injury track record. He's got injury risk moving forward, and there's a question of uncertainty as to whether he can ever become the same pitcher that he was prior to Tommy John surgery. And so many of Farhan's players that he's taken on in San Francisco, including DeSclafani, including Haniger, had injury track records. And so there's just long-term uncertainty, long-term risk in those types of players. But one thing that the Giants have often done to offset some of that is include opt-outs in contracts. If a player comes to San Francisco and they perform, they can opt out and go get money elsewhere, a la Carlos Rodon after the 2022 season. And of course, Rodon didn't live up to expectations in year one in New York with the Yankees after signing that 6-year, $160 million deal. But Carlos Rodon was a good member of the San Francisco Giants. He pitched with a low ERA. He was effective. That's why he was able to opt out of that initial 2-year, $44 million agreement that he signed. Robbie Ray, of course, has the opt out. And so it wouldn't be a player coming to the Giants if they didn't have that opt out in their contract. But I think maybe the other reason that this is kind of the prototypical move is because this is another trade with the Mariners where it's hard to say what becomes of this. It's hard to know if any of these three players will have any sort of an impact on their teams moving forward because the Giants and the Mariners have done these waiver deals for so long. A guy goes on waivers from the Mariners, the Giants acquire him in a trade. A guy goes on waivers from the Giants, the Mariners acquire him in a trade. It's usually players who don't make significant impacts. Think, Mike Ford, Tom Murphy at one time was on waivers from the Mariners, I think, coming to the Giants, or at least he then was on waivers with the Giants and went to the Mariners. Whatever the deal was, they've done plenty of these moves. Think A.J. Pollock at the deadline. He wasn't on waivers, but the Mariners didn't want him anymore, and then the Giants picked him up, and we all saw how that worked out. Again, not a great move. These moves haven't led to much, and I think that if you're a fan who's expressing frustration with the franchise right now for not picking a direction, if you're a fan who feels like this is yet another needless move with the Mariners, I get that. I understand that sentiment, but I also look at it through this window. Mitch Haniger did not fit the San Francisco Giants in 2024. It wasn't reasonable to expect him to be a middle-of-the-order hitter or in any way, shape, or form a regular contributor. Coming off of the injury last year, he's got the injury track record. He's a year older. The Giants can go out and they can either acquire a better player through a trade or a signing in free agency, or they can play some of their own in-house options, some of the kids in Matos, Meckler, other players who deserve an opportunity, and they could provide the same type of value that Haniger would for $20+ million that he was owed this year. Anthony DeSclafani just was not a fit. I covered this at the beginning of this video, but the Giants would rather see Tristan Beck, Keaton Winn, Mason Black take down starts in 2024 than give those starts to Anthony DeSclafani. He's coming off an injury, so who knows what he would have been able to offer the Giants. And with all that being said, Robbie Ray is not going to be able to offer the Giants anything at the outset of 2024 because he's coming off of surgery. So does this deal make sense? Does this make them better in 2024? I don't think any of us can say that with any sort of certainty. But what it does do is gives the Giants a peek into the potential of Robbie Ray for 2024, 2025. And yes, it's a peak that comes at a steep cost because Ray is, again, after this season, still owed $50 million. So if he doesn't opt out, if he stays with the San Francisco Giants, that is a heavy burden to pay. And we just saw the Atlanta Braves being willing to take on Chris Sale's contract from the Boston Red Sox. They're willing to pay him over the next 2 seasons after Sale's coming off of a major surgery. And so there are teams out there in Major League Baseball that are taking risks like this. But I think if you're the Giants, you look at it this way. You didn't want to pay Haniger, you didn't want to pay DeSclafani, and you didn't really want to give them opportunities this year. At least with Robbie Ray, you could see a path to him contributing in 2024 and 2025. And maybe he's not worth $25 million, but maybe he is a 2 to 3 to 4 starter in your rotation. He's got knowledge of the National League West, and he's a left-hander. And I think the Giants have to look at their division right now, look at the Los Angeles Dodgers loading up their order with Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani, and find ways to get lefties into their rotation. That's why I still think that Blake Snell and Shota Imanaga are good options on the free agent market. But what I think that the bottom line of this move is, it doesn't provide any direction for the Giants. It's hard to say whether this will ever be viewed as a good or bad move in the Farhan Zaidi era, but what it does do is sets up their next moves. It doesn't tell us what those next moves will be, but we do know that they're no longer counting on Haniger. They're no longer counting on DeSclafani, and Ray is a wash at the outset of 2024 because he can't contribute, and neither can Alex Cobb, who's coming off of hip surgery that will keep him out for at least the month of April because he's 36 years old, probably a little bit longer. Hip injuries or hip surgeries are not things that players come back from very quickly. So what this tells me is the Giants have to act quickly to acquire starters to fill out their rotation. Because right now, it's Logan Webb and a lot of question marks. Kyle Harrison could be great. He could potentially be an all-star ace caliber pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, but he's not lined up to take down 150, 175 innings in 2024. That's the future version of Kyle Harrison, who the Giants hope he develops into. They haven't built him up in their farm system to account for 150, 175 innings. Same's true of Keaton Winn, Tristan Beck, Mason Black, Carson Whisenhunt. All these guys have solid potential to eventually become major league caliber starting pitchers, but the Giants can't really count on them to take down 150 plus innings next season. So they've got to hit the free agent market. They've got to hit the trade market. DeSclafani is no longer standing in the way of anyone that they sign. They need a number two. Quite frankly, they also need a number three so that there's competition at the back end of their rotation entering spring training in Scottsdale. What this move tells me is that the Giants are setting up for more. No, it doesn't mean that there's a payroll move. No, it doesn't mean that the Giants have saved themselves money, but it does mean that they've cleared off two players who they didn't view as contributors. They brought in Robbie Ray, who might be a contributor down the line, albeit with some heavy risk. And they've set themselves up to now go and make some moves that will make them better for 2024 and 2025 and will help them figure out a path to contending. So this move to me says that there should be a lot more coming. And if there isn't, man, I'd be worried if I'm Farhan Zaidi. But something tells me there is a lot more coming. Now, whether Giants fans will embrace that lot more, whether they will like what the Giants do, that's all to be determined. I think that a lot of people feel very strongly about the direction of the organization. We've covered that plenty in the past on this podcast. We'll cover that plenty in the future as we really do a deep dive on this trade. But for now, what you need to know, Robbie Ray headed to the San Francisco Giants under contract with an opt-out after 2024. Mitch Haniger, Anthony DeSclafani headed to the Seattle Mariners. Jerry Dipoto, Farhan Zaidi make yet another trade. And no, we don't have any further idea of the Giants' direction moving forward this offseason. We'll have plenty more on this trade and other moves on the Kerry Crowley Show throughout the offseason. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts on this deal in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.